Hey guys, GPA Jesus here. In questions on factor markets, you'll often be asked to draw the graph of a competitive labor market and a wage-taking firm. This video is a quick rundown on how to draw the proper graphs properly without losing any points. To do this, I took a free response question from the 2014 AP Microeconomics exam, which you can find linked down below in the description. Let's start this question. Ray's Stable hires workers in a perfectly competitive factor market for unskilled labor. So, perfectly competitive factor market already reveals a lot. We can already draw in the labor market, and it's just a regular supply and demand curve where, as Jacob Clifford says, supply goes to the sky and demand goes down to the dirt. Look at part A, draw correctly side by side graph, which I've already done for the labor market, which you have to label in the title as labor market, and Ray's Stables, or you can just write firm. When also labeling the axis, we have to remember for labor markets that this isn't price. This would cost you some points. This is instead wage, your wage rate for both graphs, along with some zeros, and then your regular quantity. But this is important, don't confuse this with price. The equilibrium wage for quantity for unskilled labor labeled as W and QE respectively. So, knowing what we know from supply and demand, where supply meets demand, that's the equilibrium point. And from there, the quantity is QE, where this equilibrium is at, is WE. So let's move on to the next part, the wage paid by Ray's Staple and the quantity of unskilled labor labeled as WR and QR respectively. Well, Ray's Staple is in a perfectly competitive factor market. And what is one characteristic of competitive factor markets? Well, they are wage takers, as we learned in perfect competition. So you can take the wage from the equilibrium in the labor market and apply it to the firm's wage. Now sadly, unlike in perfect competition where we had Mr. DARP as a great acronym for writing out what this line is equal to, we have to remember that supply equals MFC equals the equilibrium wage. However, if we look back at the question, labeled as WR and QR respectively, the wage rate paid by Ray's Staples is the same as the labor market's equilibrium wage rate. We can also just write equals WR. Let's draw in our resource demand curve. Demand goes down to the dirt, but for here we have to remember demand equals MRP, which is just price of the good times the marginal product. So what we now have to do is find the quantity of workers that they'd hire, which if we remember from the factor market unit is where MRP equals to MFC. So why is this? MRP is essentially the benefit that hiring another worker will bring, as it's their marginal product, which is their productivity, multiplied by the price of the good. So it's how much revenue they can bring in vs the cost of having them, which the cost of having them is their wage. So you're comparing the benefits to their costs. And for this area, your benefits are greater than your costs. So why not keep hiring until this point? Because after you cross through here, your costs, which is up here, will be higher than your benefits, which is down here. So there'd be no point in hiring another worker. That's why you hire where MFC equals to MRP. So from this point, we can just drop down to find the quantity of workers that they'll hire, which is QR. So just like that, our graph is fully labeled. Unless your teacher wants you to add more stuff, this will get you full marks for a regular AP Microeconomics exam. Just this section can be a large portion of your score. So that's basically it for the graphing portion, as the rest of the video will be devoted to finishing this common problem that you'll definitely see on a lot of mock exams or even the real exam. I recommend finishing it, but that's basically it. So let's move on to part B. Part B is asking, is the marginal factor cost, which is basically the cost of hiring the worker, greater than or equal to the wage? Well, as we established earlier, the equilibrium wage is equal to the marginal factor cost. The cost of hiring another worker is essentially the wage you pay them. Workers won't just come work for you for free, they want some money. When writing an explanation for these kind of problems, you only need to write maybe 1 or 2 sentences including some keywords, as a lot of the AP Microeconomics graders are just looking for keywords and not wordy explanations that can cost you a lot of valuable time that you could instead spend on another question. Part C is asking, now assume that the government imposes an effective minimum wage for the unskilled labor, and we first have to show the minimum wage on your graph in part A, labeled W min. So since this is an effective minimum wage, that means it's above the equilibrium price since it's actually working. You can really choose any point, but let's just choose here because for more space. Let's call that W min. We don't even need to read the next part of the question to know that we're probably going to have to bring this to the firm side. Why do we bring it to the firm side? Well, once again, since the price for the labor market has been moved up here, and raised tables is part of that competitive labor market. They're the wage taker, and if the wage for the labor market has increased, so will the wage for that firm. The second part is asking that on the labor graph in part A, show the quantity of unskilled labor supplied in the labor market as a result of the minimum wage. So since we're looking at the labor market, we're only focusing on this graph, and at this price point, if we look at the careful wording, we have to realize that it's asking for the quantity supplied. So if we just go from W min, we just need to follow the price, and there we hit the supply curve. So this is how much will be supplied at a higher wage. And with a higher wage, more people are going to be willing to work for that job, as it makes sense since they're getting paid more. However, there are going to be less employers willing to hire them since they now have to pay more. So we end up with a surplus. However, that doesn't matter since we just need to find the quantity supplied, and from this point we can go down, and that's our quantity supplied. So the third and last part is asking for, as a result of a new minimum wage, with the marginal revenue product of the last worker hired by raise table increase, decrease, or stay the same. So whenever there's a question that asks how MRP will change due to new minimum wage, the answer to this very common question is that the marginal revenue product will always just increase. So I hope this video helped in helping you get full marks for factor markets. There wasn't that much explaining, as this is more of a cram video so that you can get those last minute points. And yeah, GPA Jesus out, I died for your grades.